The most bizarre aspect of this spectacle was that the Democrats who most aggressively defended Trump's version of the surveillance bill, the Democrats most eager to preserve Trump's spying powers as virtually limitless, were the very same Democratic House members who have become media stars this year by flamboyantly denouncing Trump as a treasonous, lawless despot in front of every television camera they could find. The hypocrisy is so thick that it can only be the result of
a huge heroin problem.
It would be a good hypocrisy if the Dems wanted to limit Trump's powers they were willing to grant to Obama. But the fact they don't is even more upsetting. To shed some light on what's going on in case you don't know, this is that time when your
duly elected representatives
obediently vote to troll your Fourth Amendment into an oblivion. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act expires, so before it does, the Congress just needs to say that they extend its life expectancy by another 6 years. For the second time in a row. Whenever a bill strips away rights of the people, it's always an extraordinary showcase of bipartisan collaboration. The act was passed under Bush in 2008, and it was first prolonged under Obama, breaking his campaign promise to put an end to the mass surveillance of American people.
That means no more illegal wiretapping of American citizens. No more national security letters to spy on citizens who are not suspected of a crime. No more tracking citizens who do nothing more than protest a misguided war. No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient. That is not who we are. The intelligence community is doing is looking at phone numbers and durations of calls by sifting through this so-called metadata.
We kill people based on metadata.
They may identify potential leads with respect to folks who might engage in terrorism. This administration acts like violating civil liberties is the way to enhance our security. It is not, because there are some trade-offs involved. And it's not what is necessary to defeat the terrorists. They help us prevent terrorist attacks.
And now Trump is on his way to become the next big brother. Or is he?
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here.
You see, it kind of seems that many Republican representatives seem to follow Trump's Twitter to find out how they should vote for things. And Trump seems to have a dissociative identity disorder.
I've never seen a case like this before.
There's this official personality of Trump that's supposed to represent his administration. This side of Trump supports mass surveillance without any reform that would bring back protection of civil liberties. But the other side of Trump that goes to Twitter and then instantly regrets it also seems to watch Fox and Friends.
How old are you?
9.
On this show, Judge Napolitano tried to talk some sense into Trump by criticizing his official statement supporting the spy law, saying,
his woes began with unlawful foreign surveillance and unconstitutional domestic surveillance of him before he was the president of the United States, and now he wants to institutionalize this. Mr. President, this is not the way to go. Spying is valid to find the foreign agents among us, but it's got to be based on suspicion and not an area code.
The real Donald Trump then stood up, grabbed his phone and tweeted, "This is how the African American was doing bad things to me?" Sad. This sparked so much confusion among the representatives.
The dignity and the decorum of this...
They started a chatter among each other. Well, fine, I'm voting no then. If he doesn't care, then I don't care. Adam Schiff even called for a delay on the votes to make sure they wouldn't accidentally turn it down. After all, Trump's tweet made it sound like the proposal came from the Democratic Party that could somehow hurt their leader. The situation was heating up so much, Paul Ryan had to step in to talk Trump out of this. The conversation went something like this: "Don, this is your bill. We give you more powers. You'll enjoy this. Believe me." Then, the real Donald Trump went, "Shit. Forget what I said, okay? We need it. Get smart." And the disaster was resolved. The vote passed the bill. For the next 6 years, Trump will have unchecked power over the warrantless mass surveillance, following the footsteps of his predecessors. Thanks to the Democrats. And don't even consider thinking FISA court somehow reasonably limits the mass surveillance by the US government.
So wrong.
Basically, everything gets collected by the NSA programs.
Not wittingly.
Before anybody can even ask whether they should. PRISM partners with the tech giants to grant NSA direct access to their databases. The Section 702 then allows for the bulk collection of internet traffic they didn't get from PRISM partnerships. If this doesn't satisfy their collection fetish, the NSA uses the Executive Order 12333 from Reagan, yes, Reagan, to collect data that moves outside of the US. Some say that this Cold War era policy is what allowed for the mass surveillance of today. The 80s were the worst. When companies transfer their data across their international data centers, the government gets a copy of that. But when Facebook or Google sell your data with their advertising networks, this transfer of your private information, caught up by advertisers, also travels outside of the US at some point during internet exchange. Each such data exchange means the NSA snatches your private info. And don't be fooled by the wording they use. They say they only go after foreign targets, but that's not how this is used in reality. Section 702 is just an excuse to circumvent the Fourth Amendment so that they don't even have to ask for warrants each time they wiretap an American citizen. This happens so often, they can't even tell us how many times they did this. They don't look at where communication takes place geographically. Even when you talk to your friends over the internet who live right across the street, your internet traffic channels around the world before it reaches your contact. In the eyes of the NSA creeps, this makes it a foreign communication. They manage to do this with surgical precision because the NSA taps directly into the backbone internet infrastructure like AT&T's fiber optic cables that carry internet traffic. The law enforcement is completely free to define what constitutes a foreign intelligence information. Each time they designate target selector to certain data, all related communications is included in the search and seizure. So when a law enforcement agent decides to look up an innocent American citizen, nobody asks them any questions at that point because the data has already been collected and the National Security Clause established. This National Security Clause and broad application of the foreign surveillance information is what allows the law enforcement to monitor innocent American citizens without a warrant. The NSA databases from bulk collection are huge. So the FBI uses tools that, by their own words, make it feel like searching Google. An agent just types in someone's name and everything pops up. Literally everything. Private emails, private chat messages, all of social media history, phone records, logs, metadata, photos, comments, likes, everything you do is there. This allows them to wiretap journalists who report on foreign affairs, entrepreneurs expanding their business beyond the US borders, or ordinary people interacting on forums and comment sections. Everybody on the internet is guilty by association. And now, in your eyes, you might think this is not an issue for you because you are a good person. But imagine you could sift through your entire online history, everything you ever said, wrote, posted, and you could have a look at a cherry-picked profile of the worst things you ever did on the internet, irrespective of context. And somebody takes this profile of you to the Justice Department, or it just so happens to get leaked. Such an accidental thing that happens so frequently, it got its own name. The unmasking. Nobody is going to look at the context of your whole life. Judgments are going to be made. Just take the example of how the Wall Street Journal managed to destroy PewDiePie's career by cherry-picking and fabricating stories about his content. Sure, it was constructed, and the internet plebs stood behind him, but he lost his show and some important business partnerships he was working on for years. Just imagine what the law enforcement can do with unlimited access to everything you ever did in private, thinking all along you have nothing to hide, just like PewDiePie thought nobody would take his jokes out of context to damage his reputation. This is what the law enforcement and intelligence do on a daily basis, but with what people do in private and not just publicly. Legally, they can't use Section 702 to target purely domestic communications, but they can routinely do it through vague mechanisms of broad definitions and dragnet surveillance programs. I'm sure nothing bad can ever happen. Privacy is not a partisan issue. Just like there are bipartisan efforts to revoke it, there are bipartisan efforts to fight for it. Democratic Senator from Oregon, Ron Wyden, and Republican Senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul, decided to filibuster the bill. Shortly before the FISA extension vote, the House turned down a proposed amendment of FISA that would have required a warrant each time law enforcement wanted to monitor US citizens. This proposal was a result of a long-term cooperation between Republican from Michigan, Justin Amash, and Democratic Representative John Conyers. I'm only going to say that free speech seems to be big in America, but privacy not so much. If there was a bill that would somehow put barriers to free speech on a federal level, it would probably spark a civil war. It's almost as if the Bill of Rights was looked at as a ranking of amendments rather than taken as a whole, where one can't fare without the other. Privacy is your own realm, where you are free to grow your nurture without the fear of judgment. If you can't express yourself freely in your private space, how different is it going to be in public? And that's where I'm going to leave you today. Thanks for watching, leave a like, share this video, and please, I most appreciate if you comment because I'm interested in what you think. Subscribe if you are new to this channel, and see you next time.
I think he's a total traitor, and I would deal with him harshly. And if I were president, Putin would give him over. I would get along with Putin.
Well, first of all, he's a terrible guy. I said it right from the beginning. So many people are trying to defend him. Oh, look at what he's revealed. And isn't it wonderful what he's revealed? And yet people marching in his favor. He's a terrible guy who's really set our country back. And this guy's a bad guy. And, you know, there is still a thing called execution. How does he get this information? Here's a guy who didn't even graduate from high school. He was a high school dropout. How did he get the job in the first place?